What is the butterfly effect event of your life? Ironically, I applied for a graduate program and stumbled into the wrong interview room. I was a straight A student in high school, working my bum off, studying several languages, and taking extra courses with the aim of getting into a prestigious university to study the field I was so passionate about. I got in there but slipped into depression, failed so many courses that I almost got expelled. I got burned out trying to repeat all the failed exams, worsening my health even further. I dropped out, lost my job, my family cut me off financially, and I lived with a friend until another university with a bad reputation finally accepted me to let me continue my studies. The depression got worse. I was living from minimum wage temp job to another, regularly dumpster diving behind the supermarket where I sometimes filled the shelves. I eventually graduated with almost the worst possible passing GPA and applied for graduate studies because a bachelor's degree in my field is basically worthless on the job market. 28 applications were rejected on the spot until a prestigious university invited me to their assessment center. I originally applied ironically as I was in the flow and thought, what the heck. I was baffled but immediately scraped together my money to buy a ticket for the 8-hour train ride, slept in the central station hall, and went to the assessment center. Having had a rough night and a long trip, I was exhausted, and in my tired state, I went to the wrong interview room. The lady in there firmly asked who I was before I could turn around, and it turned out that she was the director of the program I was applying for. She told me to take a seat and interviewed me on the spot. She pulled up my CV from the database, briefly commented on my formerly assigned interviewer being a jerk, and then just plainly asked me what happened. I told her everything. She listened, and after 30 minutes, she told me the time was up, but that she found it very interesting. So I walked back to the central station, angry at myself for daring to dream that I would ever be allowed into such a university again after all my screw-ups. I was ready to end it all after my return, not being able to bear yet another failure. I walked up the stairs to the ticket vending machine when my phone rang. It was the application center offering me a spot in the program. For a moment, the earth actually stood still and I broke down, crying in disbelief. I spent the next few weeks extremely anxious, wondering whether I would even manage to get that degree, thinking of my past failures and my GPA. But it turned out that the program structure, curriculum, etc. were exactly what I could have ever dreamt of, reigniting my passion for my field and getting me into an upward spiral of good internships, good grades, and new friends. I regained my self-confidence and finally managed to get that depression under control. I also worked and studied for up to 90 hours a week to make sure that I would never fail myself again. But in the end, without having stumbled into the wrong room and consequently getting a second chance by that director, this would never have happened and I would probably not be here today. Door number 2. Always choose door number 2. The first one is a freebie. That second one is where the magic is at because it's like the door of second chances. We just never know when Lady Luck comes our way. Let's see what other cool things happen in the next stories. I'm sure they're bound to get even sweeter. Story 2. There's a guy that I used to know. He was the brother of a friend whom I grew to know, care about, and share laughs and tears with, and he generally was a good influence on me. I liked him a lot because he reminded me of myself. If you've ever seen the movie Sliding Doors where one version of her makes the train and the other does not, that's what he and I were like. I was the one that, through some sheer dumb luck, had spread my wings a little, experienced, tried, and done things. Here he was, having never had a girlfriend, never had intimacy, never been to a steakhouse, and it was something that bothered him and his family too. So we decided that for his 22nd birthday, we would take him out to experience things and help him find his path. He'd really live life, enjoy a proper steak, know the loving embrace of a woman, and generally give him a year of trying new things. Then he went to see a doctor about his cough. It turns out he had an aggressive illness. From diagnosis to the end, it took about 6 weeks. I've been to a few funerals, but this one was the hardest. It was 10 years ago, and I still remember it like it was yesterday. I was depressed, more so than someone who didn't know him that well should have been, because I knew that it could just as easily have been me. I resolved there and then to live the life that he had been denied, applied for a Hail Mary job at Microsoft, got the job, and it led to bigger and better things. I also used a ton of my resources to change the world as much as I could, including working closely with a good friend of mine to launch a cycling team that has since raised over $1 million and has gone from highly experimental to nearing medical approval to become a permanent and viable treatment for illness for children. I shared this story most recently with a great friend of mine who asked for help moving, then suddenly canceled. It ended up that he had surgery to remove a growth that day. He had no idea that the reason why I wake up every day and try so goddamn hard to make the world a better place was because someone who was just like me passed away back then and never got that chance. I'll keep doing that as long as I'm alive, in honor and memory of him. Story 3. I had the worst time understanding sine, cosine, and tangent in college trigonometry. I was in my professor's office getting help almost every morning before class. She was explaining it one day and she was so patient and nice, but I just wasn't getting it. I'm usually a straight A student and I felt like a failure. I had a mental breakdown in her office, which turned into a mini existential crisis. It was awful and embarrassing, but she just gave me a box of tissues and let me cry it out. I told her I'd never had this much trouble with school before and I was majoring in aerospace engineering. If I couldn't even get past trig, how the heck was I going to become an engineer? She said, engineers aren't the only ones in the aviation field. At the end of the class the next day, she handed me a few articles she'd found about female roles in aviation, and she suggested I head over to the Student Services building to get some career counseling. I headed to the counseling office right after my class, walked in, and explained that I needed some guidance regarding my career. The woman behind the desk responded, "Oh, honey, our counselors primarily focus on substance use counseling. I'm sorry." Disappointed, I left and nearly bumped into a table set up across the hall displaying pamphlets for Southeastern Oklahoma State University's Aviation Management program. Intrigued, I grabbed one of each and the next day I contacted the academic advisor. To my surprise, I learned that the small community college where I was taking my basic courses was actually affiliated with a university located about 200 miles away. Now, this partnership allowed me to pursue my bachelor's degree while staying in the same city, thanks to the college's proximity to a large Air Force base. The classes were geared towards the base employees and active military members, so I was the only female and the only person under 30 in all of my classes. But 3 years later, I got my degree in aviation management. 2 weeks after graduation, I got an entry-level position with Southwest Airlines, and 11 months after that, I got my first promotion, which offered twice the pay. All because I had a mental breakdown in my trig professor's office. I still live near that college, and I've always meant to visit her again, but I'm still so embarrassed. But Jesus, am I so thankful she gave me that tiny piece of advice. Now that is a cool coincidence. So she had a mental breakdown, but she didn't turn to substance abuse, so she never had to talk to that counselor, and then not miss out on bumping into that table with the pamphlets that would ultimately change her life. Story 4. I was driving home to Missouri from New York and got pulled over in Ohio at about 2 a.m. I had just smoked in the car. The cop asked me if I knew why he pulled me over. He told me I was speeding and he had clocked me at 89 in a 70, but I knew I'd been going much faster than that. I gave him my license and registration. He went to his car, came back, gave me a ticket for speeding, and left, which, as far as I was concerned, was a supreme stroke of luck. Fast forward 2 weeks, I had spent another weekend in New York, but this time I flew. I got tipsy, missed my flight home, and paid an exorbitant amount of money to get on another flight so I could be at work the next day. So I was driving to work Monday morning and was craving, which I had a pretty rough problem with. It was so bad I couldn't even drive and had to pull over to recollect myself. I was hating myself because I couldn't stop using, no matter how much I wanted to stop, so I looked up NA meetings that night. As I pulled up to work, I remembered my speeding ticket. I looked to see when it was due, which I figured would be a while, but the date was set for Wednesday. My boss recommended a great lawyer and called him up, and he said he'd get me in that afternoon. This guy was way out of my way and on my usual stomping ground, but I needed to do something, so I went out to meet him. After I met him, I decided I'd just go to a meeting out that way since it didn't really make sense for me to drive out of my way again to do that. So that night, I went to my first NA meeting in an area I never would have gone to had I not needed to meet the lawyer. And here we are, 2 years and 3 months later, still clean and still going to that same meeting every Monday night. Story 5. When I was 10, my dad lost his job due to the company he worked at going bankrupt. Later that year, my mom lost her job as well. And this led us to moving to another part of the country. I live in Denmark after my dad got a job offer. We moved to a small town where people didn't care much for outsiders, which meant me and my siblings had a hard time finding new friends. As a result, I lost my self-confidence when it came to interacting with others, and as I got older, it started impacting my love life as well, and I was never with a girl for long as a result of this lack of confidence. I was lucky enough to find some great friends in high school who gave me back some of that, and I ended up moving in with one of them when the time finally came to leave the nest. About a year later, my flatmate at the time decided to move in with his girlfriend, and I moved in with another friend. So, fast forward to last year when my current flatmate decided to take a semester abroad and I had to find a temporary flatmate for the duration. We talked to a few different people and it came down to two different candidates, a girl from Poland and one from Germany. I prefer the Polish girl as we both study architecture and I feel like we had more in common. However, I told my flatmate that I'd let him make the decision and he chose the German girl. She accepted and everything seemed settled until about a week later when she contacted us saying that her parents can't help her with the rent and she won't be able to afford it without their support. So we contacted the Polish girl and asked if she still wanted to move in. She did. It turns out she wasn't even planning on going to the city I live in, but she wanted to go to Copenhagen. However, the office she applied to told her they didn't really need interns at the Copenhagen office, but they did need some in my city, and we've now been together for a year. Story 6. When I was young, my mom needed to go to the pharmacy to pick up my brother's medication before it closed. And at the time, my older sister would always drive, dad had the car for work, and whenever she drove, both my brother and I would go with her. But for some reason, this time I felt like I needed to stay home. My mom even said I should stay home. And this was weird for me because I would be at home completely alone and I hated that. But I couldn't bring myself to walk out of the door, so I sat down on the couch and waited for them to come home. And waited. My sister's boyfriend came flying in the door and asked where she was, then ran back out when I told him. Then my dad called me and asked who else was home, and he hung up. Then my grandparents came to the house, and all the while I still had no clue what was going on. There was an accident not far from my house, about a 15-minute drive away. My mom got rushed to the hospital. The side of the car where she was sitting got dinged, but somehow she managed to get herself on top of my sister, who wasn't wearing her seatbelt, and had her window down. My brother was also hurt, but thankfully there were no serious injuries. I always sat on the passenger side in the back seat, and I always wore my seatbelt. That was the side that was affected. I would have been with them that night, I know that, but changing one thing means that I'm still here. There's always a silver lining, ain't there? But it'll also get you thinking about the fragility of it all. Another case of what if, right? If you're enjoying the content, please do show your support by liking the video and also hitting that subscribe button. You won't want to miss out on the fasting stories yet to come. So thank you in advance, and let's go ahead and get to story 7. I moved away to college and was enrolled in one of those University 101 classes where they teach you how to do college effectively. I don't know. Every freshman has to take it. The first day of this class rolls around and this girl walks in and sits down. She's like the most beautiful human being I've ever seen in my life. Of course, she had a boyfriend and she was way out of my league, so I was just silently in love with her for the whole semester. Fast forward to the summer before my senior year, I still think about this girl like all the time. I had a dream about her one night, and the next day, one of her friends, who I know lives with her because I'm a creep, invites me over to their house to play Edward Forty Hands. I had no interest in this girl who invited me over, and I thought that my dream girl was still in a relationship, but something told me that having this dream about her the night before was a sign that I should just go over there. Apparently, she had been single for a while and had also actually had a crush on me the whole time we were at school, and her friend invited me over to set us up. One dumb pickup line later, and I had her number. We're now in our mid-20s, living together with our puppy, and I think I'm going to pop the question soon. Yes, dreams do come true. Now, this is the one I was waiting for, and super cool, he found the one too. Story 8. When I was young, I started reading Lord of the Rings fanfiction. While I enjoyed reading and falling in love with Legolas, I remember one story being so bad I had to stop reading it. I then discovered what a Mary Sue was, a term used to describe a too perfect fictional character and almost boring for lack of flaws, and stumbled upon the original fanfiction University of Middle-earth by Miss Cam, and a large chunk of it is about how not to write Mary Sues. Miss Cam was a Norwegian student studying abroad in Australia at the time, and occasionally in her notes would write about her time there. I thought it was so cool and exciting to be on the other side of the world. I also have a December birthday, so I decided that I would like to at least be able to celebrate it in the summer. I had my sights set on making my way to Australia. A little over a decade later, after losing my dad and grandpa and after exiting a bad relationship, I found myself on a beach, hosted by my friend's very generous family in 38 degrees Celsius, celebrating my birthday on the other side of the world. I traveled the east coast of Australia until I settled in Melbourne for about 6 months. I was scared and I often felt lonely, but I am so grateful I was able to experience living abroad. Story 9. When I was in middle school, I faced some tough times. I decided to seek help by going to counseling for the first time, but it didn't go as I hoped. The counselor told me that my problems weren't real or important, and it hurt a lot, and it made me hesitant to seek help again for a long time. I went through some really difficult periods and still deal with the physical effects of my past struggles. But that negative experience with the counselor actually motivated me to pursue a career in counseling. I never want any child to feel dismissed or unheard like I did. Mental health support for young people is lacking where I live, and I want to change that. Now I'm in college studying for my social work degree. That hurtful encounter with my first counselor helped shape me into the caring person I am today. It taught me the importance of empathy and understanding. So, despite the pain she caused me, I'm grateful for the inspiration she gave me to help others. Story 10. I walked into a room looking for a small, no name Christian campus organization I had never heard of, but a friend from a different school told me to go there. I walked in and was about to turn around as only 10 people were in the room, but a senior, I was a freshman, walked over to me, introduced himself, invited me to sit with him, and then introduced me to the pastor and the two other freshmen in the group. The pastor then, within the week, planned a camping trip because he learned I love camping. That one friendly face saved me from loneliness and depression, brought me back from dropping out of school a year later, and led to an internship for 2 years after graduation. That internship led to a near full ride to graduate school where I plan on using that degree to be a pastor on a college campus with my now wife, whom I met in this campus organization. Story 11. Deciding to go to a dance that was being put on by the nerdy clubs at my university, I hit it off really well with a girl there, and after hanging out together quite a bit, we eventually started dating. I had basically no friends in college before meeting her, and I made quite a few friends through her. That relationship ended up being very problematic, and she was pretty manipulative at times, so we broke up 6 months later. But not before a friend I made through her got me a job at an escape room. There, I met my current girlfriend, who was a huge inspiration for me to apply to graduate school. My current relationship, several lifelong friendships, and my career track can all be traced to deciding to go to that dance. Fruit from a poison tree isn't always bad, even though it did lead to a pretty bad relationship. It also led to everything else, and my life is in a pretty good place right now. Story 12. Tuesday evening, I was a lazy student who was actually heading to bed when one of my best friends hit me up with a text asking me to come to our favorite bar. At the time, it was a rule that you had to come if asked, so I got out of bed and went down there. Skip a few hours ahead, I'm in the bar, chatting with my friend. A cute curly-haired girl comes up to us out of nowhere, asking us if one of us wants to dance. We decide to do rock, paper, scissors for who should go. The loser should go. She didn't notice us saying that, luckily, and I lost. Skip 15 years ahead, here I am, living in a nice house, 3 kids, one of them sadly not here anymore, but that's another story, another butterfly effect, and a cute curly-haired woman as my wife. Life, man. All right, I love this one because sometimes, even when you lose, you win. Story 13. I was driving to a concert in 1980, which was about 350 miles from home. About halfway there, I picked up a hitchhiker, and it turned out that he was going to the same show. We were really early, and he told me that he had met some women from the town the show was in about 2 weeks previously and that they had his ticket. He asked me to take him to their house, suggesting that perhaps they could get me a ticket as well. I wasn't worried about scoring a ticket in 1980. It had been my experience that tickets were always available at the door. However, I took him there anyway. We got to the house, and that's when I discovered that the venue only had 2,700 seats and was sold out. Luckily, my new friends scored me a ticket. So that's how one tiny decision can change an entire life. But hold up, if you're up for more unexpected turns, check out the next video. What's your real life plot twist? Story 1 is Netflix worthy. I swear you gotta see it. I mean, read it or hear it. I'll see you there. Thank you for watching this one.